What's the most disturbing secret you've discovered about someone close to you? You/Cybersaint2K responded. I don't know how disturbing this is. It turned out pretty fantastic for one. But not for another. I was adopted, and told a silly, magical story about my birth parents that most certainly did not seem true even when I was a child. At 57, I learned I was the result of a college affair between a very seriously Jewish young man and a very Baptist young woman. She was rushed off to a home for wayward girls to give birth. He followed her there, many states away, begging her to keep me and live a life together. But their families both said absolutely not. Jewish people were not viewed as white in the mid-60s, and her family most certainly did not want her marrying a non-white. Plus, she was a very committed Christian and did not want to convert to Judaism. So off I went, into another family. I recently discovered 3 lovely half-siblings and we are all pro or semi-pro musicians and get along well. I never got to meet my mother, she died a year before I searched. My father is out of the picture and wants to be left alone. And I'm fine with that. I'm grateful for the love he gave me. It was enough. Another person that was in my non-bio family was also adopted. She was older than me. She tracked down her mom later in life, too. She was in a hospital and had been since the day she was born. She was born holistically disabled, physical, mental, cognitive, learning, sensory, and was raped by an orderly. And she discovered she was the result. Endings to our searching are not always happy. You/deleted responded. She was my best friend of 7 years. We had literally been through it all together. I moved out of state with my now husband, but she convinced us both to move back to be closer with her, after about a year. We had no real ties to the state we had tried out, so we said screw it, let's go back, she's basically family. We were all so happy to be reunited. She was over almost every night for dinner, we all laughed and talked and had a blast. Best year of my life. Then slowly, she started trying to turn my husband and I against each other. Anytime we had an argument, like any couple does, she would text each of us about how right we were, trying to foster animosity between the two of us. With me, she started talking about how she had a plan B for us, that if my husband and I couldn't make it work, I could move in with her and we'd live happy lives together. With my husband, she started talking about her infertility issues and how she wanted to have a kid just like him, she just needed a sperm donor. This all happened at around the same time, and my husband and I compared texts and figured it out. She wanted to take his sperm, and have a baby with me. When confronted about it, she refused to admit anything and started lashing out at both of us. It got to the point where she would show up unannounced, banging on the door, demanding a place in our home. It was so terrifying and panic-inducing that we ended up having to move and change our phone numbers. I guess it's so disturbing because I had never had a friend like her, only to find out that she cared about me, but in such an unhealthy and scary way. But yeah, that's my story. You/Charlie24601 responded. While my cousin was walking around with her son in the woods, she came across a hunting stand. She climbed it, and found a pair of binoculars. Sitting straight forward, and lifting the binoculars to her eyes, she saw her own bedroom window. Let's be logical here, if it was a legit hunting stand, it was facing, and closer than 500 feet to a residence, which is illegal, which means it had to come down with prejudice. If it was a peeping Tom, well, it had to come down, with prejudice. When my brother and I visited not long after, she showed us where it was. We tore it down and literally wrapped it around a couple trees. Bent the fucker to complete uselessness. I got an angry call the next day. Did you tear down a hunting stand? Yesterday? Fuck yeah I did. That was your uncle's. Her mother's brother. Turns out my cousin reported it to the family and they ignored the issue. When the uncle was asked, he said there was just an old treehouse out there. Even when he was exposed, they didn't really care. They were more upset about the damage we did. Suffice it to say I have written off most of that side of the family. Edit. The uncle in question is now dead. You/Friends Waffles Work responded. When I was young I had vague ideas about my uncle being dodgy. In that at family events such as weddings etc. my parents would tell me and some of my cousins to stay away from him. When I was in year 8 we were doing a lesson in citizenship class where we had to cut out pieces from a newspaper, no idea why, and I came across an article saying he'd been recommitted to Broadmoor prison. Went home and googled him and found out he'd been in prison in the 80s for kidnapping and raping someone, and had been in and out of prison since for other offenses. He also tried to sue the Sun once for defamation since they printed something incorrect about him. He was awarded 1p by the court because it technically was defamation, but it was agreed that what they had printed couldn't have damaged his reputation any further. All I know is that he was in a halfway house for a long time. However, from what LVE gathered, he was released around 5 years ago. U/manic_moth95 responded. I found out when I was an adult that my mother didn't just abandon me one day after work like I had been led to believe. Turns out she had been gang raped. She said they took her wallet and made a disgusting comment about my picture inside. I would have been a toddler at this time, and she was just too scared to go home. She said they followed her. She said when it was over and my stepdad took her to the hospital, they had to stitch everything back together down there. She spent that time away on and off the psych ward. My mom and me still have a rocky relationship for reasons beyond this, but I definitely understand her better. She's had issues with drinking and her mental health all my life, and I really think it's because she's never sought proper help for what happened to her. Underneath all that trauma, drinking, and grief, is my mother. And she's one of the most beautiful souls that'll ever walk this earth. For clarification, she stayed in my life, just my grandparents raised me. There was a lot of other drama as well, but none of it worth getting into. U/Gabon90 responded. A suicide in the family. My granduncle died in the year when I was born. It always got the beating around the bush treatment. He died young and suddenly. Alcohol took him. It took a visit to the graveyard with my father above the age of 30 when he finally told the whole story. He was a medical technician. Due to a chronic issue, he lost his job and not long after that, divorced. Got together with someone else, but he couldn't recover from the loss of his job and eventually hung himself. For long years, a severely depressed man's struggle with health and family issues with no help to come was sold to me as an anti-alcohol PSA. Only because as a bad way of self-medicating he spent his last worst days with heavy drinking. I don't understand the secrecy, whether if it's for the repurposed story or a family-wide shame over the true one. And knowing that depression runs deep in the family, I find it terribly harmful that such a tragedy still doesn't make them see the writing on the wall and admit that the problem is real. The official story is still death from alcoholism-related complications. U/Schmoobyboo responded. Finally, I can post this story in one of these. So my now husband, engaged at the time, and I are teachers and did a couple-year stint in bush rural Alaska. It was pretty intense but a great adventure. Learned a lot we wanted and a lot we didn't. We befriended one of our colleagues, an older single man who seemed friendly enough. We would often go over for dinner, go hiking, and go shoot his gun collection at a local rural beach using the school's Honda. Rural life, no animals or local fauna were harmed. He took on the role of an uncle figure for us. We stayed at his Airbnb spare bedroom at his house in the city on vacation, once, too. Now, our second year teaching there, he brings along this young woman at the start of the school year who he claims is his niece, and she never leaves his house. He claimed she was having trouble living with his brother and she was taking classes online to graduate, and she confirmed this with myself and other women in the village. Cut to spring, she leaves for home separately from this man and people ask why. He claims she patched things up with his brother, her dad, and went home. It turns out this girl was basically an underage girl he met online, and her father tracked her down after she contacted a local woman about her situation and sent a state trooper to escort her home. She had been reported missing for 8 months prior. Fucked up part was, on top of going to court for that situation starting the following summer, he tried to coax another underage girl offline to live with him the following school year, and it turns out that entire chat history was a sting by the FBI. He's in prison, now, until 2043. U/FerkFirebeard responded. Found out after his death that my great-uncle was a grand wizard in the KKK. Opened a chest in his attic with photos from rallies, lynchings, and cross-burnings all around some rural part of Alabama. We were actually horrified by the discovery and suddenly realized why he was so negative towards his black hospice nurse who was otherwise kind-hearted and caring with him and the family. Edit. Since a very large number of you want to keep calling me racist, telling me how much of a fuck-up I was for burning everything. We, as in my family, I was 16 at the time and had no real say in what the adults' elders decided. We decided to burn all of it out of intense shame for what we discovered. We held prayer vigils through our local church for the people affected by his hatred. Had I been older, I might have taken some of the more damning photos and forwarded them to people who could have brought closure to victims. I made this post at great risk to remaining in my family, as they would still see this as romanticizing his actions. To my family, simply speaking, his name is done so at great risk to your standing on Will's remaining part of the family. So yes, I do feel like it's too late, because the only thing I have is that my uncle was a member of the KKK for an unknown amount of time before 1950. U/deleted responded. My best friend in high school had a brother who was only a year older than her. I wasn't close friends with him or anything, But I always liked him when we were younger, in a friendly way. He was always goofy and seemed kind-hearted, even though he did consistently stay in trouble as a teen. He has had a serious drinking problem ever since middle school. I knew he had some demons, but I never thought he was a bad guy. Well, anyway, I lost touch with my friend for a few years after high school. But, when we ran into each other a while back, we had a long catch-up session. While talking, I couldn't help but notice that she hadn't mentioned her brother at all. That is odd, considering that he has always been present in her life. So I asked about him. Apparently, her brother had raped a 12-year-old boy when he was in his mid-20s. The boy's family found out about it and pressed charges against him. I was absolutely shocked. I knew he had some serious emotional issues, and I knew he had been dealing with substance abuse, but I never thought he would do something like that. At most, I imagined him being in and out of jail for random, petty drug-related charges. Or maybe even go to prison for a drug-related felony charge. I never thought this was the direction his life would take. My friend said that she thinks his issues make it extremely difficult to have healthy relationships with people his own age. That he feels safer socializing with people much, much younger. She told me that after the charges were pressed, he was an absolute wreck, as if he were going through a breakup with another adult. It wasn't the charges that bothered him. It was the fact that he seriously considered this kid to be his boyfriend and he didn't want to lose him. Not that this makes anything he did less fucked up. It was just shocking to me, to hear just how warped this guy I grew up with was, and I never knew it. All this time, you think you know a guy. Thanks for watching, everyone. Like and subscribe for more videos like this one. If you enjoyed this video and want to dive even deeper into our community, consider becoming a channel member. Members get exclusive perks like early access to videos, custom emojis, shoutouts, etc. And it's a great way to support the channel so I can keep bringing you the content you love.